ਅਕਾਲ ਚੈਨਲ ਨੂੰ ਸਬਸਕ੍ਰਾਈਬ ਕਰੋ ਨਵੀਂ ਵੀਡੀਓਜ਼ ਦੀ ਨੋਟੀਫਿਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਬੈਲ ਆਈਕਨ ਨੂੰ ਕਲਿੱਕ ਕਰਨਾ ਨਾ ਭੁੱਲਣਾ।
Welcome to another edition of the Insight Show with myself, Jaswant Singh Bora. And on today's show, I have an interesting guest from the world of politics. His name is Andrew England Kerr from West Midlands, Birmingham, an independent MEP. Andrew, welcome to the Insight Show.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming today. And currently you're a independent MEP.
That's correct.
You're a former Brexit MEP until the end of September. You have your own law firm and other business interests. And obviously you have a keen interest to want to shape and change the way politics or people's choices of views are heard. Give and take what's been going on within Parliament and other aspects that we're constantly seeing in the media. In your view, is politics broken at the moment? Are we kind of disillusioned or disheveled what's going on?
I think it is certainly broken in the sense of the argument over Brexit, because for better or for worse, the Parliament decided to let the people choose whether to stay in Europe or not. So for once they put the key decision back to the people, and when the people decided they wanted to leave, that has caused a major problem, because the majority of the politicians in Parliament didn't want them to leave. I'd say most of the establishment and the media were against them leaving. And so you've got that massive contradiction and the divergence between what the people voted for and what the people in power could do. So basically the people in power have really prevented the vote of the people being respected. That's your real problem here. And naturally, when you have such an important vote in this country's history, and they feel it's been disrespected and frustrated by foul means or fair, there's a natural anger and an upset over it. So it's very, very serious at the moment.
We see with Boris Johnson and prorogation and Parliament and some decisions a few days or a week ago, we had a very heated Parliament debate, and questions were fired at Boris Johnson, who obviously we've had people say his use of language is quite inflammatory. Some say to the point, even when we hear around referring to Joe Cox and Jess Phillips saying she had received death threats because of potentially what's going on.
Yes.
Is this the way for politicians to behave and make decisions in the interest of the British public, knowing that these individuals and people like Boris Johnson will have to go over to Europe and negotiate a potential deal or an extension?
No, it's certainly not, because we've seen the consequences. It's highly inflammatory and it incites violence, whether you like it or not. Whether Boris Johnson was right to use the word betrayal, I think he probably was, because we've had the vote. And not to respect that vote is a betrayal of the British people. But there is a certain level and degree of what is and what is not acceptable. And it got toxic, to say the least. And a lot of it is probably down to the fact we don't have a constitution. In countries such as Switzerland, where they have referenda much more often and they are respected. So I think not only, even whatever happens, there must be a very strong call by many people that we have to have a constitution.
What is the prospects of us getting a deal within Europe? And give and take, we've got, there's another talks again of possible suspension of Parliament. We had Boris Johnson, who was claimed that he had lied to the Queen, and we have the Supreme Court ruling and the Benn Act and all. It seems like a very turbulent time, and how do we iron all these issues out?
I think it has been a turbulent time. These are symptoms of the real cause, which was the referendum result not being respected. Whether you liked the referendum result or not, it wasn't the thing. How do we go forward? Well, you've got to look really at at the cause and the circumstances. We almost had a perfect storm in this referendum. We had after the result, we had the EU, in my humble opinion, fighting for their survival. They knew full well if the UK left and did well, other countries would want to probably follow us. Countries such as Greece, with 40% youth unemployment. Spain, 30% unemployment. Because under the euro, which they're in, this financial straitjacket, there's very little they can do with their economy. And so morally, if you were a Greek MEP, and you wanted to do something about this horrendous problem, you would look at alternative ways. And if you saw a country doing well out of the EU, you might naturally think to go and also join someone like Great Britain. So they knew they were up against it. At the same time, you had, say, a parliament that was Remain, an establishment that was Remain, a prime minister in Theresa May that was Remain, a civil service that was Remain. Quite honestly, you had a perfect storm. I don't think you had a hope of getting a fair deal from the EU. No shadow of doubt in my mind. They're not going to give you a fair deal. So it meant really, if you're not going to get a fair deal and to honour the referendum result, really probably the best way was to come out with a clean break without any conditions, which some of the top German economists would say would still do better. But there would be some problems.
And the EU Council Chief Donald Tusk is slightly optimistic of a potential deal that could happen, or extension, or is it just, again, trying to reassure the public and the country that there's something happening, but in essence, we probably may know different?
We may not do. But also, what is really important, it's not a question whether you get a deal or not get a deal, in my humble opinion. It is the question, if we go for a deal, is that the right deal for the UK? Because despite having been a former Brexit MEP and now an independent, I would not want us to leave the EU under any circumstances that might, for instance, if they had a deal that actually could harm the UK in the long run. Because it would be leaving the EU maybe in name only and cause serious damage to our country both now and in the future. So we must be very careful not just to say, well, we had a deal, it's all done. Before we do that, we must look very carefully at the terms of any deal. Very, very carefully. Because under the Theresa May's deal, it was horrendous. Even if we ignored the Irish backstop issue, which I think was a total charade, because even the EU's own report, experts' report, said there was no need for a hard border. So I'm not one for that. I think it was a total charade. But there were even more important and more horrendous terms in the Theresa May's agreement that would really damage us as a country. And I had made it absolutely clear, even if you ignored the Theresa May backstop part and we had the rest, I would rather we stay in the EU and we fight another day than come out on terms that would be horrendous for our country.
Because this is something, again, in Parliament that was raised, and I think Michael Grove, who's currently leading the Brexit kind of campaign to withdraw. He speaks about Operation Yellow Hammer, and this is what I call the gospel according to the Conservatives, where the worst case scenario, this could happen.
Yes.
And should we be looking at a worst case scenario? Because can take into consideration what they're trying to achieve politically is really the sovereignty of Britain to stand on a platform. But it's also been said and noted that we could become a third status country if we leave. So isn't that even more damaging to us than saying staying in the EU?
It could be. It could be. If you come out on terms that actually would bind us hand and foot to do international deals and look after it, it could be worse. But you see, Yellowhammer was a very good example of sometimes the misrepresentation. Yellowhammer was the worst possible case scenario. It's, for instance, in one of my companies, we have to plan every single day for a worst case scenario that our entire computer systems and our database go down. So we plan for that and we take measures. But in 25 years, It has never happened. So I think the yellow hammer was probably used as an excuse to hammer the Brexit cause, whereas it should have been saying, to be honest with the British people, what is the realistic prospects? Yes, you should always look at the worst case scenario, but you should also look at the realistic problems so we can plan accordingly.
Even in terms of employment, the TU say that a no deal Brexit will threaten the hard-won rights of workers, and we're talking about single market, free movement. So it seems as though businesses and the degree of uncertainty, me speaking to Vince Cable a few weeks ago, and obviously their intentions to want to stay in Europe and negotiate, seems not to threaten even the rights of individuals. So to what extent will we be able to have access into Europe and work and exchange and collaborate on an international platform?
Well, see, I disagree with the TU's point of view. I can see where they're coming from, but at the moment, this unfettered immigration has actually been highly detrimental to a lot of labourers. It has suppressed the rates of pay and the increased competition that have made a lot of people suffer. But at the same time, we obviously need some amount of immigration, whether permanent or short term, for industry, agriculture, etc. I'm much more in favour, and also I don't think it's a very fair system, the current system. It's not on merit, it's regardless, you just can come in willy-nilly whatsoever.
It's quite dishevelled.
Whereas I would like to have a much more points-orientated, merit-based system depending on your sector. I think that would be a fairer system for all concerned. But so yes, it's not a cut and an easy situation, but one that we will have, at least if we came out on the right terms. We as a country could determine what we think is fair and right. And it was interesting, I was talking to one of the EU officials on some other matter, and he was asking me, how are we getting on? How are you getting on in the EU Parliament? And I was saying, well, with all due respect, I don't think it's very democratic, if you want. I can't invoke legislation, I can't revoke legislation, but I can comment on it. And I don't think that is pretty anti-democratic. And I said, well, and also really, all this problem about Brexit was brought on unnecessarily, in my view. Had you just given Cameron a little bit more freeway, we would not have been in this situation. You could have allowed him to say, well, okay, yes, we will have free movement, but it will be free movement for people who are coming to a job, rather than regardless. And actually, in fact, the EU officials said, well, actually, that would have helped out a lot of other EU countries as well. But I think the damage has been done on the relationship, unfortunately, and although I would have said that was a common sense approach, that we have free movement, like free movement of goods, I think it's a wee bit late. But Gisela Stewart, who was a Labour MP that I had a great respect for, was Minister for Europe, and she obviously with German close connections, and she had said quite clearly she thought the EU was unreformable.
Again, Boris Johnson and the current government trying to give us reassurances is quite sycophant in terms of influencing people that, look, there's something there, there's something on the table. But he's also made mention in his speeches, in the rhetoric that's taking place in Parliament, and some of the more specific issues affecting Britain. And you're an MEP for the West Midlands and Birmingham. We've got local issues that are impacting us.
Yes.
And he has said something which possibly we can agree with, that all this, if I use the word headache, or all this current political debris or carnage, all these political arguments, and it's becoming a bit of a military war zone. Leave him to do the negotiating, but let's concentrate on some of the issues that are affecting us locally. We've got crime, violent crime in our local communities, problem with the education, the NHS. In your view, Andrew, how do you seek to deal with some of the local issues as well? Give and take, violent crime statistically, according to the Home Office, and particularly in Birmingham, has risen dramatically, with over 450 cases in West Midlands, with about 250 alone in Birmingham related to knife crime, for example. How can we move forward dealing with some of the local issues that are affecting communities, businesses, families, people losing loved ones?
Well, certainly knife crime is something is disgraceful, and your heart goes out when people lose their sons or their daughters in such a barbaric manner. How we do it? Well, if I was in a position, I'd be looking, number one, what has been successful around the country to reduce the crime rate as one way to bring those steps in. Rightly or wrongly, I'm a strong believer in more direct democracy. I'd like to see directly elected chief constables to make them far more accountable, so they'd know, if they don't respond and perform adequately, they'll be out. In respect to the particular part of knife crime, I would like to also not only take a more aspects or areas that have been successful in other parts of the country, but look to the more longer term as well. And we have a broad approach to this. So basically, I'd like to see a lot more of the younger policemen actually interacting with the schools in the sports and build up the respect for them. Actually, education so the victims, mothers, help where appropriate, would go into the schools and explain what are the serious consequences. And we have proper poster campaigns that are permanently displayed showing the perils of the knife crime, much more directly affected. Where there are high areas of knife crime, we have a much more direct and immediate response to those areas, apart from everything else. We have got to educate the people, the children, the serious dangers of it, but also we have the courts actually take proper steps. We've got to have, so it's got to be a number of steps, because people have got to be shown the serious implications of being caught with a knife. And if you don't have this broad approach and a determined approach, it will just continue. And whether you like it or not, we saw it with New York, which had a horrendous crime rate, murder rate. They had someone come in with an absolute determination to crack down on crime, and right on the minor crime, so it's set through. And my real worry is minor crime is being tolerated in this country, not enforced, and that is leading to a general increase in that crime is acceptable.
It's also a question where we hear it on the news and in Northampton Police, where they're issuing tasers to police, and obviously we can see a gradual move towards possibly increasing firearm. The question that I raised with the West Midlands Police Crime Commissioner. So it appears as though a more military style approach. I mean, we see it in 2011 with the riots in Birmingham, and Bill Bratton was called over. David Cameron had jumped right over the head or the steps of Scotland Yard to take this zero tolerance approach. There are other local issues affecting us. We talk around democracy and equality and being more democratic in processes. Give and take, we write in Birmingham, the government has put pressure on schools to look and review around some of the teachings that children are being exposed to, particularly with say LGBT and being promoted in schools. But we've got faith schools who have their belief in God and religion and etc., particularly Christian and other schools, and obviously there are a lot of angry parents saying, look, we want to have our choice, this is what democracy is about, this is our human right, we should not be forced to teach something that we do not believe in, we'll still give an education. Do you agree that parents there, and isn't this about promoting political equality, especially in the education sector? Parents should be entitled, if it's not they disagree with, the Education Act and other laws exist to give us choices, and that is what democracy is about, choice and freedom. Do you think these kind of schools should be allowed to exercise their rights in the face of such adversity? I
think, number one, any school must keep within the law, 100%. My concern is, have we had the proper debate, both in Parliament, because maybe I missed something in the last general election. I did not see any party saying this is what we're going to do when we get in power. These are the regulations, instructions. So I'm concerned that we haven't had the proper debate. I am very concerned. I'm a strong believer that children, as far as we can, should grow up to enjoy their childhood without subject to undue influence within the law. And we have to be very careful we don't allow that undue pressure, wherever it is, comes in. But yes, we are in a multi-faith society. I think Birmingham actually has been very successful in leading the way. And I wouldn't want to see extremists of either side upset that what we have being quite a good tranquil thing. But where there are extremists that have sought to abuse their position in school, we need to confront it, and confront it very quick. And regardless whether you're black, white, pink with yellow spots, we must be able to confront where there is a problem, not hide away, because we have seen what can happen when, for the sake of race or colour or something, political correctness, issues have not been taken on.
And this is where people should not be demonised for that, or there's a sense of something quite paradoxical as far as government's concerned, and educational departments and ministers need to look and review that and give people that power and that choice to do that. As we're coming towards the close, and the other issue around governments and discrimination, even the Windrush scandal where certain people in the Caribbean and other communities were treated unfairly, and people's livelihoods and jobs and things were lost because governments, we saw what happened with Amber Heard and some of these
totally unacceptable.
We need a government that reflects the issues that are happening in communities, racial, religious and cultural, and seeking out to promote their interests. If we're talking about being British and promoting democracy, these are British individuals that came, and others for that matter, into England and made that kind of contribution.
Absolutely. And let us look at the reason that Windrush caused. The civil servants destroyed important and critical documents. I haven't seen any civil servant held to account over that. And quite honestly, it's like with a lot of things. We must hold those that make the mistake, be they a civil servant or a politician, to account. Otherwise, it will be seen that they can carry on with the same bad standard of working in future. That was an appalling affront, and we need to make sure we take steps that those that made the mistakes don't do it again, and it will be a lesson to others.
Well, Andrew, to summarise in 30 seconds, what would you do or propose to bring in if you gain more seats, gain more power, and in the long shot end up in number 10? If you eventually got to that position of
it's
power,
not my wish.
Summarise within 30 seconds.
I can tell you, it's not my wish. I've never been a long time. I've stood as a businessman with a conscience to stand up for democracy,
for morals and values.
For morals and values. It is not, I think, it is not my wish to be a long-term politician by any stretch of the imagination. While I'm here, I will do my best. What I'd like to see, certainly in politicians, I think it's high time that we have a higher standard of politician in this country. They've got to be better educated, better experienced, not these career politicians. They need to have a better standard of care. I think we need proportional representation.
More diversified, cultural, racial.
The House of Lords has got to be reformed. Absolutely. The honours system has been completely and utterly abused. I think if we can't bring it in, I'd kick it out, quite honestly. The honours system should be for people that do work without pay and beyond exception, and that are inspirations.
Well, Andrew, that's quite quintessential for me to summarise that. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for coming on to the Insight Show and sharing a lot more about yourself and what's currently going on in Parliament. And hopefully we'll see more of you in your campaigns within West Midlands, Birmingham.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to the viewers for joining us today on the Insight Show with this special edition with Andrew Kerr. Until next time, take care. God bless.
ਅਕਾਲ ਚੈਨਲ ਨੂੰ ਸਬਸਕ੍ਰਾਈਬ ਕਰੋ। ਨਵੀਂ ਵੀਡੀਓਜ਼ ਦੀ ਨੋਟੀਫਿਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਬੈਲ ਆਈਕਨ ਨੂੰ ਕਲਿੱਕ ਕਰਨਾ ਨਾ ਭੁੱਲਣਾ।